The Prospect is out with an interesting analysis on the disempowered progressive flank under the Biden administration's thumb, who have a seat at the table without getting a voice on any legislation.
Editor-in-chief at The Real News and host of Working People podcast, Max Alvarez, joins us now to weigh in. Thanks for being with us, Max.
Hi, Max.
For me.
So what do you make of this? I think it rings true to me, certainly, but maybe you have a different take. It looks like the Biden administration has almost killed the left with kindness. They're listening. They're inviting them to the table. They're not doing a lot of what they want, but they don't come off as hostile, so then you feel bad being too critical of them, maybe.
I think that's right. I mean, that's my read on it, too. I think the author of this piece had a really great line near the very end where they said, the progressive left has traded access for influence. And that was, really the kind of game from the beginning, right? This is something that, as the article also points out, was part of, Obama's strategy. It is an adopted part of Biden's strategy to essentially take that progressive energy, placate it, and convert it into essentially nothing, but maybe like symbolic acts. And, I think my broader read, and, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic here. I'm really basing this off of what I've seen from the Biden administration so far. And they do have time still to prove me wrong, though I'm having serious doubts that they actually will. But, I'm thinking that like 10 years from now, we may very well look back at Biden's presidency as one of the greatest missed opportunities in presidential history, right? At a time when, we were in most need of bold and principled action, and when voters had handed Democrats the ability to take said action, the establishment threw all of its efforts into wasting that political momentum and putting symbolic band-aids on this country's festering wounds, right? They've largely sat by while voting rights are being gutted with a butcher knife around the country, right? They have capitulated to watering down the infrastructure bill to the point that your average voter doesn't know what the heck is good about it or what's actually in it, right? And, because for them, bipartisan chumminess with their colleagues across the aisle in D.C. is a higher priority than actually helping people, right? They broke campaign promises on COVID relief checks and raising the minimum wage. They have dilly-dallied on climate change while historic droughts and fires are cooking, and heat waves are cooking the planet, and floods are wiping away entire neighborhoods. We don't have time for this crap, and Democrats have really squandered this opportunity so far. But the right is on the move. The right is not taking a seat back, and progressives should really kind of take heed that this tack right now is not working. No matter how much the Biden administration dangles a reconciliation package in front of us, promising that they'll actually, do something for us down the road.
Well, Joe Biden told us from the very beginning that nothing would fundamentally change. And so we were told, it's kind of like when you're dating the guy and he tells you he doesn't want to get married or anything like that, and the girl dates him anyway, and then, and then finds out he doesn't want to get married. I mean, it shouldn't have been a shock to any of these progressives that Joe Biden is kind of keeping to his word, that he doesn't want anything to actually fundamentally change. And certainly there does seem to be this trade of, well, we're at least getting a seat at the table. He's at least nice to us. And that was very different than how, let's say, Hillary Clinton has reacted to the progressive left, where she is kind of throwing insults and icing people out and doing what she can, like, for example, against even like Nina Turner in her campaign. So what do you think? Are there any changes whatsoever? I mean, when I look at the biggest policy issues that the progressive left has been advocating for, I mean, we've been calling for gun control and Medicare for all and climate and HR 1, and those were, I think, the biggest of the policies that the progressive left over the years have been calling for. I mean, are you seeing any change at all? Am I wrong? Is there at least some fundamental change that you can see?
Some, yeah, like a little bit. But I don't see enough. And that isn't because I'm a leftist purist, right? That's because I have eyeballs and I look around me and I see people in pain. I see climate chaos emerging years before scientists had predicted it actually would, right? I see a lot of issues that need to be solved. This isn't like some sort of partisan point scoring exercise for me. I've tried to be as honest as I can whenever I come on the show or any other show that my allegiance is to working people, and working people constantly tell me that they are hurting. And when I see the people in positions of power who actually have the ability to do something to help them not doing anything about it or not doing enough, that's where my ire comes from. Because I think I would also add, in terms of major legislative priorities and political slam dunks, is the PRO Act, which has just been kind of sitting there, and Biden has more or less tossed it to Congress without really kind of using his influence, even though labor leaders and working people across the country are saying this would be a monumental shift in labor relations in this country that could help us undo the very historical processes that have led us to have a minimum wage that has stagnated for the longest time in American history, that has increased wealth disparities to historic levels, that has demolished the organized labor movement, and that has allowed things like worker misclassification to run rampant, while tech companies like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash are exploiting the hell out of gig workers around the country. You mentioned that having a seat at the table was kind of the big allure of getting Biden in office for progressives. I don't want to necessarily knock that, right? I think, again, with the progressive left being as institutionally weak as it is, you got to take what you can get, and you got to, try to play ball and try to see if you can give some influence because you were trying to advocate for people who need help. But, a seat at the table really doesn't mean much when you're stuck in a high chair, at the end of the table, and you're only given kind of like nominal, influence, and then you can be comfortably ignored after you've said your piece. What is that again, that's trading access for influence, and I don't think that is going to work, because they've shown us that it doesn't work. Like you said, they are who we thought they were, and they're showing that with every single day.
I think, this is an outsider's perspective, because obviously I'm not a person of the left, so I think I have a little bit of distance from it. I think the left was a little set up for disappointment because it was so, the media acted as if the left was having this major moment, the socialist moment, the progressive moment with the success of Bernie Sanders in 2016, and then it looked like he was having a lot of success until Joe Biden easily vanquished the left, marched to the nomination, and then won the election in a not particularly close election. I remember when I'm a libertarian, I remember when the media was saying libertarians were having this big moment back in 2010, 2012, and the Republican Party was going to be forced to embrace the Paul Ryan, Rand Paul type economic, limited government, all that stuff. And then what happened is the Republican Party went, or at least rhetorically, went in the exact opposite direction from what my ideology was, and it was more successful than it had ever been, or more successful than it had been in the last 10 years. I see something similar happening with Biden, who is, he's positioned for great success if the pandemic continues to ebb, the economy comes roaring back. And this is in some ways a moderate country. There are some policies on the left that are popular, particularly economic policies, when they're not, I think, described in some of the terms that progressives like about them. So, that's my read on the situation. I'd love to get your reaction.
I think it's a interesting kind of perspective, and I think that I would largely agree with it. I think the building off one of the things that you said is that one of the kind of crucial points here is that there are quite a few policies or causes on the progressive left that are incredibly popular, mm-hmm. that could be political slam dunks, that both people on the left and the right actually really want, right? And I think that the fact that we the progressive left is kind of in, but maybe not of the Democratic Party entirely, that gives progressives a little more ability to kind of push for what they, truly believe in, as opposed to placating a party apparatus that takes all kind of popular will and converts it into some sort of pragmatic BS that no one is actually happy with, right? You have the ability to advocate for the things that your base actually wants, which is important. But yeah, I hesitate to necessarily kind of say that we were set up for failure. I get what you're saying in that, like, the kind of media narrative about it was quite sensationalist, and it didn't kind of take into account the fact that, as far as the power levers go,
Yes.
even if you have something as massively popular as Medicare for all, or raising the minimum wage, right, or taxing the super rich, right? I mean, if you don't have the power to do that, it's all kind of symbolic messaging at that point, and that is what the Democratic establishment is based on. This is what the New Democrats, of which Biden is a part, the Democratic ensemble that emerged in the early 90s. This is what they're always about. You see, like, ghouls like James Carville go on TV and people talk about him like some brilliant strategist. And, this guy's been historically wrong a million times. And really, like, his genre of politics is just, how do we curate the best symbolic message to get enough people to believe that we're actually going to do something, even though we don't actually do it, right? There's actually a very simple way to approach this. If you help people, if you actually fulfill your campaign promises, they're going to keep voting for you. It's not about messaging. It's not about symbolism. Like, I feel like I'm going nuts because, again, these things are really popular. If you do them, people will say, hey, they actually use their power and influence to do something, to respond to the will of the people. Right now, they're not doing that. They just want to be the adults in the room who want to kind of gather us around the table, make us feel heard, and then kind of carry on doing what they were always going to do in the first place. And as far as, like, the electorate and the American political system goes, that is a march straight into a 2022 and 2024 bandsaw. That's what I see in front of us.
Yeah. And what's really, I think, really unfortunate is that the progressive left, and really just the left in general, spent so much time hating on Donald Trump that they were unwilling to learn, I think, the most valuable lesson that the left could learn from Donald Trump, which is you don't need to placate the establishment or the powers that be. I mean, all these progressives that are just saying, well, I'm just happy to have a seat at the table, and at least Joe Biden's listening to us, and he's playing nice to us, inviting us to events. And look, that doesn't actually get you anywhere. What gets you somewhere is actually going to the electorate, to the base, and saying, look, these people over here are not doing what we want, and we need to get them to do what we want. And then that pressures the establishment to suddenly say, oh no, if we don't get in line, we're going to lose our seats. And that, the power of the bully pulpit, ultimately, is what the progressive left, I see this big failure to mobilize, especially their large social media following. I was one of those people that was very disappointed with the Squad for not forcing the vote. I know that's, it's a real controversial thing, but I just felt like, what are you doing? I mean, why are you placating the establishment when you should be talking to your electorate, your base? These are the people that got you into office. This is what we want. We should be the most important people to you, not Nancy, not Joe. It shouldn't be about getting a seat at the table with them. It should be about remaining in your seat because of us.
Yeah. It's a very good point. I think the Democratic establishment at sometimes is more powerful or more ability to tamp these things down than the Republican establishment, which was wholly insufficient, could not contend with, didn't want Trump at all, but Trump's base did, forced Trump on the establishment, and then eventually they had to welcome him with open arms because he was politically successful. The Democratic Party, you haven't quite seen that same dynamic take hold, even though many of the progressive type people do have this base of support. The Democratic Party so far the establishment has held them at bay. Maybe not forever, but we'll see. Thank you so much for joining us today, Max. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
More Rising when we come back.